the truth is the number one stopper. They say you think, but you never want to speak up. They say you're hiding there, you're busy, but what's on your mind, kid? What's on your mind, kid? They say out loud, there will never be me.
Hello and welcome to episode 61 of the Board Game Barrage podcast, a podcast about board games, the latest hotness, and how to have fun with your friends even when you're losing. My name is Callan, and I'm joined by my hosts, Mark and Neelan.
Hey. Hi.
Cheery. It's
As
good
always.
to be cheery. As soon as the record button comes on, these guys light up.
Fired up. Yeah.
They're much kinder, much nicer, and they pretend that we are friends.
Just as long as the light's on.
Right.
Today, as always, we're going to be talking about the games we have played, as well as our featured topic. Today's featured topic is going to be playing board games without a board. Digital board gaming.
That's right. Yeah, you're right.
That's
You're
exactly what we're
That's
talking
right.
about.
I agree with you, yes.
So a lot of people have asked us, do we play board games specifically on our phones, on our iPads, on our computers? And what is that process like? What games are we into? And that's today's featured topic. But before we get to that, as we always do, let us start with games that we have been playing recently. Mark,
Yes.
what have you been playing?
Well, I love this because this gives me a chance to show off my beautiful German. As many of you may not know, I'm quite proficient at German. So the game I played most recently is a game called Heul, doch Mau, which I'm sure I pronounced perfectly. And I think translates, no, I should say, definitely translates to the crying onion. So this game is sort of a take on Uno. What you're doing is you have a hand of just 4 cards. The deck consists of, I think, 5 colors, numbered 1 through 7. And you are playing the cards in front of you in one stack, Uno style. So the card you play has to have either the same color or the same number as a card you previously played. And at the end of the game, all the cards in your stack will score you as many points as are on the card. So if you play a 7 card down to your stack, at the end of the game, that card is going to be worth 7 points. But the twist on this game is that when you're playing that card, if you can play a card to either of your opponent's stack, again, following the rules of Uno, you must. So even though I want to play that 7 to my stack, if Neelan has, say, an orange card and that card happens to be orange, I must play it to his stack. Or if it's 7, I must play it to his stack rather than my own. So there are a lot of times in this game where you find yourself either unable or unwilling to play a card because, for example, you may have a 7 in your hand and not want to play it to your opponents because you don't want them to score 7 points. Because the hand size is so small, you often find yourself in a situation where you can't play a card. And what you do in that case is you take one of your cards, you play it face down. Pictured on the opposite side is a crying onion, which is where the game gets its name. And then the next time it comes around to you, that acts as a wild. You can play any card on that. So you can start fresh.
Before we go further,
Yes.
what possessed you
Heul, doch Mau.
to play this game? You saw
Heul,
the name,
doch
Mau, and you said, that sounds like something I'd eat for dinner.
Right. Crying onion.
But instead,
I'm big on onions.
I love Uno.
Right.
But the
I
German
love
kind.
Uno. I love onions. I love
love
German.
Germans.
Perfect.
Is
Perfect
it
combination.
good?
It's good. So to just wrap it up, if you play the crying onion, when it comes back to you, you can play any card on it. So that's nice. But the penalty for playing the crying onion is at the end of the game, you count how many crying onions you've played, and whatever number that is the value that is no longer scoring for you. So if at the end of the game, I've played 5 of the crying onion cards, all my 5 cards in my scoring pile don't count. So it's a balance. It's actually interesting because sometimes you can't look at your stack, but sometimes you know, hey, I haven't played many 4s, but I played a lot of 3s. So maybe I'm sitting on 3 crying onions, and I know that I'm not going to get hurt very much by playing a 4th one, so you'll play it. So I liked it because it's very simple to teach. If you know Uno, you know this game. It's, again, a game where it's full of tough decisions, although it's a little more streamlined in terms of its tough decision making than a game like Arboretum because you only have 4 cards in hand. A lot of times, because you're playing with so few cards, you're very limited in choices. So simple, tough, plays quick. And yeah, it's just a very unique take on a game that everybody knows. So this is going to be, I think, hard to find for now because I think it's only in German. I think you can actually order it on Amazon.de and get it shipped for, I think, a total of like $12. But this is Heul, doch Mau. Yes.
I just want you on record saying that your recommendation to the audience is that they get on Amazon Germany
Yeah.
and order Duck Mau Uno, the
No.
German game,
Heul, doch Mau.
and that is a thing they should do.
That is the thing that they should do. That is a thing you should do. You'll be the first kid on your block with Heul, doch, Mao, and you will be very cool.
The coolest.
That's right.
The coolest crying onion kid.
Hey guys, I know you wanted to play Uno, but
Right. Yeah.
Hell
So I
yeah.
just imported this from Germany.
and it's there's no English on these cards.
That's right. Exactly.
Cool. Well, I wanted to talk about a game, and I'm going to just be honest in the upfront that I did not enjoy this game, and that game is Architects of the West Kingdom. So this is an extremely popular designer and series of games where all the art looks the same. So that is Raiders of the North Sea, Explorers of the North Sea. I don't actually know all the names.
Invaders of the North Sea.
Invaders of the North Sea, everyone of the North Sea. And guess what? They're all the same game that's been repackaged with a different color scheme and then resold to you. So this is a worker placement game.
They're not that similar.
They're all equally bad, Neelan.
Okay.
So Architects of the West Kingdom is a worker placement game where you are building buildings, acquiring resources, putting your worker on different spots, except this one is red, guys. The cover of this one is red, so that's how it's different than Raiders of the North Sea. So if you thought that, well, my Calyx, it's looking a little blue, and there's not a lot of red hue on my Calyx, then Architects of the West Kingdom is a game for you. What this does is it takes away the only interesting thing about worker placement games, which is that it lets you play a meeple anywhere you want, even if there are other workers there. So the entire premise of a worker placement game is a series of actions that you can take, but your friend is going to take it before you and block you from doing that action. So there have been numerous ways to make this mechanism more boring in recent Care Bear years, like in A Feast for Odin. In A Feast for Odin, instead of there being, 12 to 15 spaces that the 4 players are working on, there are 75 of them. I think it's more like 60. But no, okay, I digress.
But actually, I want to dig into this a little bit. Like
Before you dig in, I just want to say my favorite Care Bear year was 1979.
In Architects, I mean, so there's no penalty. You can double up your people. Is there?
So the interesting, or the quote-unquote interesting thing about Architects of the West Kingdom, and actually the cool part, let's be real. There is a cool part. You play one worker on a space, and then you get 1 stone. Then the next time you play a worker there, you get 2 stones. And then the next time you play, but everyone can also be similarly doing that.
Are you triggering off other players' workers as well, or only your own?
Yeah. But the mechanism that allows interactivity, and I say interactivity in quotes, is that you can go to a space that puts everyone on a certain space in prison. And so that takes their workers, puts them in prison, and then makes it hard for you to get them back. And you're thinking, oh, that sounds kind of interactive. That sounds interesting, right? I've got your eyes are lighting up right now. Except it takes 1 action to get them back, and you start with 20 workers. Literally, you have 20. That's not a Kellen hyperbole. You start with 20 of them. So the interactivity amounts to someone realizing that you're about to take a 5th action of there and going, well, we can't let him do that. And then in a 4-player game, someone has to hurt their own game to put other players in prison. The interactivity is so much more limited than you think. This game is extremely loose. You can imagine the game. You could build out all the mechanisms right now where you're going to the different stuff. Oh, this gets you 1 of that, 2 of that. I'm building buildings. I'm gaining some people that allow me to pay 1 stone less for buildings in the future. But the twist, the unique angle of this is the prison system, but it's so much less interactive. I feel like, we played a game of the estates today. There was more interaction in 1 turn, 1 round of the estates than an hour and a half of Architects of the West Kingdom. These games are so popular right now, so I'm sure we'll get some fun notes about this. They're extremely beautiful. The artwork is amazing, and they are fine. They just don't do anything interesting. If you want to play a worker placement game, you want to play Agricola, you want to play Feast for Odin, you want to play, what's your favorite worker placement game? There's just so many. Kalis, fantastic, mean, interactive,
tight. Super tight
worker placement game. And Architects of the West Kingdom is none of those things. Honestly, and then this is an interesting thing, it sometimes makes me question my own tastes in relation to the hobby. It's sort of like, I tell people, oh yeah, I really like board games. And then I look at the board games that people like, and I go, wait a minute, do I actually like board games? And that was the existential crisis that I had with Architects of the West Kingdom. Like, how could this be a part of the hobby that I like? And then maybe it's like, well, maybe I don't like this hobby.
Well, I mean, not that it exists at all, but it's like to the extent that it is, right? Because it's
Yeah,
getting
no,
so
no.
much. Yeah. I mean, because
I
there's
have
a
no
place
problem.
for it, obviously, but
Well,
you're saying that there's not
no,
even a place for it.
Well,
We've spoken about this before, this idea that if the game is not giving you anything that another game that exists in the space is already doing, does it have a place in the hobby? And it sounds like that's what you're saying.
It sounds like you're saying it doesn't have a place in the hobby, but I don't think that's an indictment of the hobby. You're just saying this is like a trash game. Like this is a game to disregard and play something better.
a lot of the design decisions and directions the hobby is going in
I see.
that are lauded and liked
Okay.
by people on the internet make me question where we're headed.
You don't like where we're headed. Gotcha.
So
Like
you
a
feel
grumpy
this
old
is
man.
Right.
Okay. You feel this is like sort of endemic of like where we're headed as
Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Care Bear.
Care Bear Land.
Year of the Care Bear.
That's right. No, but I do think there's an interesting parallel to Feast for Odin. And this isn't me trashing on Feast for Odin because I mostly enjoy Feast for Odin, but the way in which Feast for Odin makes more pleasant the meanness of Agricola
Yeah.
is by just giving you more spaces with variations of the same thing.
Sure, but it's for a very specific purpose. I don't necessarily agree with you on that.
How don't you agree with me?
Well,
what is the specific
purpose
in
is
the
that
design of Feast for Odin?
What a Feast for Odin tries to do is open up a massive amount of strategies that are all viable. I don't want to say equally viable because that's maybe being presumptuous, but are viable that you can explore in a different way every single time you play it. It's essentially like a bunch of different games that are all wrapped into one, and then you don't have to explore every single one of those avenues every single time.
Right, so I would contend that worker placement would not be the best system for that, and that it's almost shoehorned into it. You could just give people a list of actions.
I can see that argument. Yes, I can see that argument. I still don't strictly agree because I still think that there are options that you get locked out of in a Feast for Odin that are a big part of the game, that are still hyper competitive despite the big action board.
I don't think you can argue with the premise that Agricola is harsher because you get actually locked out.
Absolutely.
And that what Architects of the West Kingdom has done is said, well, actually,
That's not important anymore.
that's not important
Right.
anymore. And what Feast for Odin did was said, well, there's 5 versions of that, and they're each 4.5 good. And, you might they're not equally good, but I'm saying they're enough space for everyone with a small variety. I guess I don't think you disagree with what I'm saying, which is that it's a more pleasant version of what has existed in the past.
Yeah, I would agree with that. But
less confrontational. So what is
Yes.
the design decision? What is one of the purposes or design decisions behind that? It is to make people feel less bad.
Okay. Yeah, I would buy that. I think the distinction for me between what you're describing with Architects of the West Kingdom is that you've completely diluted the mechanic entirely for the purpose of pleasantness, whereas I think what Feast for Odin actually quite smartly does is it changes the focus of the game by purpose of making the action space as big as it is.
Yeah, I mean, we're probably at semantics at this point.
Sure.
So, as mentioned, Architects of the West Kingdom is a beautiful game. There is currently a Kickstarter, or just finished a Kickstarter, for another version in the series, Paladins of the West Kingdom. So this one is also red. But for me and my house, I will be waiting for the purple cover version to come out. I'm hoping by 2021 I can have that on my Calyx because it is lacking in purple. Neelan, what have you played this week?
So Kellen and I have played Nusfjord, which Mark spoke about a while ago, I feel like, a couple of months ago.
I'm sort of on the cutting edge.
Yeah, and Kellen and I just slowly catching up.
Yeah.
So Nusfjord was interesting, and a game I particularly wanted to play because it was presented to me, talking about a Feast for Odin, it was presented to me by a friend as better than a Feast for Odin, which to date is probably my favorite Rosenberg game. So I was excited to try it. It's a game from last year, I think. It is a Rosenberg game that is very much in the farming vein, except you're fishing. You're fishing companies. Each turn, you sort of collect a number of fish. Those fish get distributed to yourself and other players based on how many shares they have in your company. And then the rest of your fish go into your excess pool. Over the course of the game, you can move your excess pool to your actual spending pool. You're collecting other resources worker placement style in 7 rounds of the game, in which you have 3 different workers. So you have 21 total actions in this game, which is tiny. It's a game that runs about an hour and a half. And the actions you're doing amount to sort of distributing your shares to other players, clearing forests on your player board, collecting wood by deforesting those forests, building buildings to sort of combo off these other cards, which are elders, which you collect, You're also sort of spending fish to this serving tray, which is one of the primary ways you get points in the game. So if you have, say, you have these multiple empty dishes, and the first one is worth 3, then 4, then 5. So if you can, in a single turn, you have 12 fish, you can put 3 down in the first one, 4 down in the next one, 5 down on the third plate, and get a whole bunch of points that way. And then those fish then become available for other players to take in order to activate their elders. The game seems to sort of lean heavily, as in Agricola, on the array of cards at your disposal at the beginning. Like the buildings that become available are everything in the game. They're going to sort of determine the abilities you're going to have, whether they're passive abilities when you take actions, interesting ways to combo off some of the elder cards you're collecting, and they're also going to be towards the end of the game the primary way that you're going to get points. Towards the end, you're going to draw 3 cards, and these are these end of game scoring cards, and if you can't build them, then they go into open display for the rest of the table to potentially pick up and build themselves. So, like Mark described, it had this interesting sort of idea of you're somewhat invested in other players because of the way the share system works. Right. But for the most part, it's a very sort of streamlined, quite good version of one of those sort of Rosenberg-style farming games. Yeah. Kellen, how did you like it?
I liked it a lot. I think it has a lot going for it. It's the right length, which I think is always helpful in the everything in the kitchen sink design mentality that appears to be going on in the industry. I really like how tight the worker placement portion of it actually is. There are spaces on that worker placement board that 2 people are allowed to go to. But still, sometimes it's the first 2 people in a round who are going to be acquiring an elder card, and that's really the thing you need to do. The economy is a lot looser, I think, than Agricola, where it's devastating. You need to feed your people constantly. It does have a variant in terms of feeding your people. You do have to feed the elders that you've acquired. So if you want those special powers that only you can have, each round before those fish come to you to spend, you have to feed all your elders one time. They make it feel a little bit nicer because if you feed your elders enough time, you get some of that fish back. Mm-hmm. So you actually kind of want to do it. But at the same time, so the fish are flowing, everything feels tight. It does have an upfront where there's a lot of information to digest. Whereas Agricola, you have a hand of 7, another hand of 7. In this, there's 20 buildings.
Yeah, all at the beginning arrayed in front of you.
And you've got to figure out what combo to build in conjunction with those elders. That information density in the upfront is not something I traditionally am drawn to. I think the rest of the game is so stripped down that it works for me. It felt similar to, Agricola All Creatures Big and Small, which is the 2-player variant of Agricola, which has a bunch of special buildings out at the very beginning, and that determines your strategy through tight worker placement. The way in which that fish row goes is really interesting. If there's enough fish available, you kind of want to take an elder because you get a free action. So,
and that doesn't happen very often, that there are those fish available on that plate.
Right, and so that plate is filled up by other players selling fish for victory points. So there is a fun interactivity there, but it's not too cutthroat. But it is cutthroat through just the blocking that you're doing on that worker placement board. I found this really, really good. I want to play it some more. It didn't give me the same exact feeling of Agricola, of feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm just never going to make it, or that desperation. So that the highs weren't quite as high for me as Agricola, but it was better overall. I feel like I wouldn't have a game where I was just, misery farming, as they call Agricola. There are times in Agricola where, man, you're just
out of it.
Done. I don't know.
Done.
Where you're just done. That's right, Mark. It was great. Very interesting.
Yeah, I think the tightness of having literally only 21 actions for the entire game is crazy. And the worker placement board is tiny. Like I said, there's just not that many spots for it. And then very quickly they're used up over the course of a round. And you feel like you sort of have to find something useful to do that no one else has taken. It gets hard to even just work through that. I didn't love it on my first play, but I was definitely very, very intrigued by it. I had the same problem that you had, where once we had done the cursory, okay, this is what this card does, this is what this card does, and you've explained them all, I've already forgotten what the first card does. So you have to be positioned somewhere where you can just see all of the cards and really read over them repeatedly. I found that a little bit troubling, but again, as you play it more and get familiar with the cards, I'm sure that would change. I had one very specific problem, which I'm not sure was just a problem of my strategy or just familiarity with the game, which is I found it really hard towards the end of the game to actually turn what I was producing into points, because those end game scoring cards are to some extent very specific on what they score off of. Like one of them would be get 4 points off of every elder, say. And up until that point, you haven't seen them because they only come out at the 2/3 mark, so you might not have gone heavily into elders. And for whatever reason, all of the combinations of cards that were available, none of them were felt especially worth what I would have to put in to get them. So I literally got to a point where I was like, okay, I have all of this fish and all of this wood, and I don't even know how to get more than a couple of points out of it. And that felt hyper-specific to my game of it, so I don't want to give that too big of a knock against it. But I really liked it. I think, like you said, it feels like a game that I want to learn to get good at because of how tight it is. You kind of want to figure out its systems to be as efficient and as optimal as possible. It's just hard because it definitely didn't excite me as much as the first time I played Agricola or the first time I played A Feast for Odin. But yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, it does have the A, B, and C decks as a way to increase the replayability of it. So we were playing a game with the B deck, so unsure what the other decks do. But I did find it smart that way in which you got some of the end-of-game scoring cards, and if you wanted to build them, you have a couple turns to do it. Otherwise, you're about to let those loose into the market. And I thought that was a fun mixture between the density overload of having everything available at the beginning versus other games. It's like, when do you give those players those choices? And I thought that was a clever bit in the middle to help with that.
That's the right time to switch over. You've sort of gone down a specific road. You know enough about the game. Now make a key decision.
This felt like a very combo-centric game to me in the ways you can have the buildings combo off of each other and off of the elders. There is that like information dump at the beginning where you have all the cards, and that can be a little daunting. But I liked seeing like, okay, my optimal combo would be to get this building and this elder. But if somebody takes one of the buildings, I'm going to have to pivot to maybe this building and that building. And that's the part I sort of enjoyed, just having this display of options that was available for everybody. It's not sort of the Agricola where it's only for you, but it's available for everybody. And just seeing like optimally make these resources to build that building, which will combo with this another building. And which order do I take them in? Do I take this building because it's more crucial to me, or do I take that building because whatever? So I liked the combo-ness of Nusfjord.
Yeah, I can see that. I want to play it more, for sure.
The shortness of the game lends itself to wanting to play it again. It's not like you feel like it's going to be a big haul to like.
I would say like it would go an hour and a half at the longest.
At the longest, I agree.
Yeah, that's Nusfjord.
Cool. So that'll do it for the games that we have been playing recently. Before we get to our featured topic, we always like to read a review of the show. People write in and ask what is the best thing they can do to help the podcast. Currently, the best thing you can do is to leave a review on iTunes or tell a friend about the podcast. If you tell someone and they download it, you've helped us a lot, and we really appreciate it. And we appreciate all the support you've given us. All right, so this review comes to us from Tom Vissel. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce Vassal?
Vassal, yeah.
He works at the Dice Tower. That's a weird company name. Okay, just kidding. That's dumb.
We'll do that bit every week as long as it's funny.
Please. This review comes to us from Lithium Steel. That's a cool username.
Yeah.
If you like board games, you've come to the right place. What I sought in a board game podcast was an intersection between board gaming and the rest of life, something meditative. Okay, he's definitely talking about...
He is talking to you, yes, that's right.
Voila. Well, that's not me. This trio is among the best at delimiting the mechanics of a game and expressing how design choices add or subtract to an experience. They manage to be both respectful and polite while still being entertainingly opinionated and dismissive. Viticulture, which I love, but I also love as a target of snarky jokes. That's me. They maintain focus and make liberal use of post-editing cuts. You can hear it in the jumps of voice pitch, a habit I very much appreciate.
That's me.
In their topics, they are always cogent. In their topics, they are always cogent and incisive. All right, Mensa people, cogent? We looking it up? Are we pausing?
No, as in speaking with clarity.
Oh. Well, that could have been more clear, Lithium Steel. A conversation about gateway games led them to ask whether one should convert others to gaming, which no one has ever bothered to talk about. Discussions about collections led to deeper thoughts on materialism, compulsion, and guilt. Brilliant. I hope they continue coming up with good questions. It can't be easy. Minor quibbles. They tend to return to the same games often.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And sometimes the ribbing teeters from fun to tiresome. But I'm searching for cons here. I give the show an unreserved recommendation. Thanks for the solid work. I'll be listening from right down the road in Orange County. Sincerely, thank God I'm not a Dr. Phil. P.S. Please do really check out Heart Society. We can't say that word on the air. They're great.
Yes, they are.
Though
They
I'm
are.
a fellow Wolverine hater in California.
Oh, yes. Nice. I love it.
And a Michigan State grad who's been bred to always go green. My vote is Red Tank for spearheading the show and drawing out the humor.
Don't like that part.
Drawing out the humor. I'd give him that.
It just it feels like you know us so well.
That was pretty effusive. I like that. That was nice.
It's very much appreciated. I think the biggest point here is some of the deeper discussions that we have about board gaming and how it relates to real life. I do find that we end up sort of digressing either before or after the podcast, and some of it makes the cut and some of it doesn't.
Yeah.
You know, even just this week on the Discord, which you can find at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord, I spent a long time arguing with others about nostalgia and whether that's something one should be interested in pursuing. And that might not have to do with board games now, but I'm sure we'll work it in
To a
somewhere.
topic,
Yeah.
And it is kind of the point is to have a fun conversation about something. And board games, for me personally, are a framework, to do that.
So before we move on, just a really quick shout out to a YouTuber whose videos I've used quite a bit over the last couple months. They're called Just Play, and he does a bunch of how-to play videos for a lot of games that you don't find how-to play videos for, and they run the gamut from really light to really, really heavy, and he's just very concise, really great production, and I just don't see much talk about these videos online. But if you're looking for a how-to-play video for a game, I would really encourage, I would just encourage you to seek out his channel in general. It's called Just Play, and the videos are just fantastic, and I don't think he gets enough love. So Just Play.
Cool.
We were not paid for that. Actually, we've never been paid for anything related to Board Game Barrage. That's a shame. All right, on to today's featured topic, which is board games and cyber. What is even cyber?
Am I cybering?
Am I?
Are we all
Wow, we're
cybering
going
right now?
No, we are absolutely, undeniably not cybering right now. So we wanted to start this topic by people have asked, and so we wanted to answer, do we play board gaming apps? Specifically, are we all playing Carcassonne on our Switch now because it's so antiquated to pull out that box? Are we playing Through the Ages on our computers because the game is fiddly and annoying to break out? So I think I have the least experience here, so it's great that I'm leading this discussion. Why don't I first ask you guys, how often do you play board games in app form? And what are some of the best examples for you or the games you play most often?
The clear answer for me is Through the Ages app. For the reason you mentioned, like the game itself is fantastic. It is extremely fiddly, hard to get through in a single session because it takes an hour and a half per player, especially if you're playing with new players. And the app version of the game does all of the micromanaging for you, like all of the moving components around the board to sort of track resources. All of that's taken care of. There are a bunch of just sort of like logistical checks you have to do at the end of every round in Through the Ages, all taken care of for you. It allows you to play the game asynchronously as well. So if I'm playing this with someone back home in South Africa, we're playing it over the course of like a week or two, rather than having to sit down for like 5 hours at a time in order to play it. It's just my preferred way to play that game, which is a game I wish I would play more often otherwise. Other than that, the only other one I can think of I ever got into to any degree was Onirim, but only because, I guess for similar reasons, it's a pain to have to shuffle the physical deck of Onirim, and it's a fun way to sort of play a solo game.
Onirim is a 1 to 2 player card game, but mostly it's a cooperative experience. But Onirim is an interesting one because you're searching for these keys and doors and connecting them with this incredibly beautiful artwork. The app is super well done. It's one of the only board game apps that I play as well. But in a way, it feels more similar to what a app video game would already be like.
Yeah, I can see that.
Than other stuff, because you're competing for a little bit of a high score each time, and you're trying to get further. But you're now playing Through the Ages with people on Discord, bro.
Yeah, that's true.
That's
so,
awesome.
yeah. Kurt, a friend of yours and a friend of the site, effectively, is where we've been playing like regular Through the Ages games with each other.
I just must have missed the invitation.
I've invited you to play Through the
Might
Ages
be-
mjust many times.
It might be in my spam folder.
Yeah. Just double check that.
But that clears out after 30 days, so I'm sure it
Yeah.
auto cleared.
Keep checking. It's
Okay.
probably in there somewhere.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, what about you?
So I was going to say that previous to a couple weeks ago, I had basically not played any games digitally. But Neelan bringing up Onirim is the one game that I did play quite a bit digitally, although I haven't played it in quite a while now. But yeah, speaking of our Discord channel, I recently got a game going with some people from our Discord of Concordia. and this is on the French side. I don't know how to pronounce it. Beaujolais or Beaujolais something, which is a
Duck Mao.
Mau Mau. It's a good callback. So this is a
To 10 minutes ago?
yeah. So this is a website that offers a bunch of games for asynchronous play. I guess I'd looked at it before, but never really got into it because I just wasn't sure how long the games are going to go. Anyway, playing Concordia with a group that you're communicating with otherwise, that you're sort of friends with, has been fantastic. The implementation is great. And that sort of got me going into trying other board games online. So actually, this is sort of a timely topic for me because in the last couple of weeks, I've gone from basically playing 0 games digitally to now I've got a game of Concordia going on with the Discord people. I played a number of games of Can't Stop digitally.
By yourself?
No. What? Solo Can't Stop?
I don't know.
No.
I just heard playing with yourself.
A push your luck game, 1 player. Be tough. So yeah, I've played some Ink and Gold digitally a number of times.
By yourself?
Wow, high five, Neelan.
All right, ready? Here you go. When do you guys take this? Dixit online?
By yourself?
Targi?
That's a 2-player game. I know that, Mark. Come on.
So the point is, I've played a number of games now online, and I don't think it's for me in every. I don't find myself.
Wait, you played Dixit online?
Yeah.
What is it, like they scan the cards?
No, it's incredible. Like the card art is like already like obviously.
Copyright infringement?
I think this is used with permission. I would never do anything illegal or even semi-illegal. So this is all above board. But there are a number of sites that have board games available online, and I was just shocked by how smooth the digital implementations are. I've never tried, what is it called?
Tabletop Simulator? Yeah,
right.
or Tabletopia.
Which sounds interesting, but I feel like that's a lot more fiddly. That's sort of basically they give you a physics engine to play the game in, but you have to know the rules. You have to know when to turn cards.
Totally.
Yeah.
So like in the best case, they'll sometimes have the rule book and some sort of like digital implementation of the rule book there. But yeah, you're basically just given a physical space and the components. Right.
Yeah. But if you make an illegal move there, you're not stopped.
Yeah.
Right.
You can technically script that in Tabletopia, but that's not the majority of the games.
So, but the sites I'm using, Board Game Arena and this French site that maybe we'll link to or something, have a thing in the show notes, have been fantastic. Again, I don't feel myself abandoning physical board games at all, but it's nice to have that sort of on the side to play a turn every once in a while. I've always sort of been hesitant to play the games I like in board game form digitally because I feel like, for example, Through the Ages, that's like a game now that couldn't even imagine playing in physical form because it just feels like the digital version is clearly, almost objectively superior. There's a part of me that worries about seeing things in like a purely digital aspect, and there's so much about the whole like physical nature of board gaming that I enjoy that I'm worried about.
You don't want to lose.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
You went and saw Ready Player One and then came home and threw away your computer and got rid of your cell phone.
Exactly. That's me.
Welcome to the future, Mark. So my experience with board game apps has primarily been Onirim. I think this was a game our entire group was just all playing and discussing together. There's also an online innovation website where you can play innovation without any of the card art or any of the pleasantries. It's a pretty bare bones site, but it's cool. But I have misgivings about it, and we'll come back to that later. Not specifically for innovation, but playing your favorite games many, many times in a row and what that does. Other than that, I've played Diplomacy via email, which is something super cool. Diplomacy is a 12-hour negotiation game, but when you play it by email, you do 1 turn per week, per day, per month, and then just email everybody or text everybody and try to negotiate with them on a long-term, long-scale thing, which I think is super great. There's a card game I have called Ortus Regni, which is a really cool 2 to 4 player. I think it can go to 6, but I'd never do it. Card dueler game. And there is a amazing digital implementation of that on Steam that is free. And I actually used it to learn the game. And I've played against the AI maybe 4 or 5 times just to make sure I understood all the mechanisms. It's so unique. This game features like beautiful card art, but there's no words on the cards. So the digital implementation was amazing as a way to learn the game. But I have been trying to get Neelan to play it with me digitally, and I think that's something that we'll probably do. Other than that, I've downloaded occasionally whenever the apps become free. I have Ticket to Ride on my phone. I've played it 1 or 2 times. Ascension has a pretty good app that I've tried before. For the most part, I enjoy the physical components and the people that I'm playing with, but I think that is what I want to get into next. Like, what are the trade-offs? There's something inherently great about how easy it is to do scoring, for example, in a digital board game. So
Right.
I recently played a game called Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, which I did not enjoy, but that's a topic for another day. But the scoring was 15 minutes long, at least. Everyone has to have a paper, with 100 different columns in it. And just realizing that you could take a picture and an app could tell you the score, or the digital implementation would know your score ongoing, does make you realize that there is room for some digital help. And so what do you guys think about the trade-offs between what you're getting digitally versus what you get in a board game at a table?
So I think for me, the biggest thing I'm afraid of losing when it comes from switching from a physical analog implementation of a board game to a digital one is the social interaction. I think that is the thing that I would worry about losing, or that I don't like when it comes to digital implementations of games. The scoring is nice, although for me, I don't really mind games that have a complicated scoring because it just feels like the summation of a game. I guess if I played like a very short game and the scoring was, which is sort of the case in Between Two Castles of Mad King Ludwig, the game is relatively short and the scoring is fairly long. But scoring always just feels like, the last part of a game, so it doesn't really bother me that much. But a game that was fiddly is a game that I could see preferring to play digitally. But I think in most cases, losing the social component would be more than enough to keep me from going digital.
So in your game of Concordia that you're playing now, do you guys have a little message chat room?
We do not.
Where you're trash talking as last week?
No, there isn't. I mean, there's a chat that is going on Discord, but even that has been just like, hey, sorry for taking a long time on my last turn, or it's been just very mechanical about playing the game, but there hasn't been the trash talk. I mean, I think you could do trash talk in a digital game, certainly, obviously, but there's something about being across the table from somebody that is, I feel like, would definitely be lacking in a digital version.
I think certainly lacking, but something like what you were describing with diplomacy over email sounds like you would almost open up new avenues for like interpreting that game. This is something I've actually done a lot with Resistance digitally through sort of play by Slack and play by forum methods. And it completely transforms the game, obviously, because you're not looking at people, you're not relying so much on bluffing. It becomes a lot more about sort of logical and sort of team manipulation. So that's interesting in itself. But the other thing I will say is that speaking of like Tabletop Simulator and Tabletopia, the principal advantage of those games for me is I can play board games with my brother back home in South Africa, and we do it like online with a microphone set up, and we're just talking to each other the whole time, right? So if you don't lose that actual social component,
that makes sense.
I'm with you, like absolutely.
Yeah,
like
I guess when I envision digital playing, most of the time I see it playing with people that I don't really know.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not necessarily going to be like free form talking to them the whole time.
Yes,
yeah,
yeah,
exactly. So that said, like I haven't done Tabletop Simulator as much as I would want to, but the one time I did it, I played it with friends in Holland and England and over here like simultaneously, and it was just a really, really cool experience. Like we would never ever be in the same location to play a board game, and we knew each other very well enough to be on a mic talking to each other, but there was just no other way we could physically do that.
Well, at the start of this, you guys said you didn't play hardly any games digitally. It sounds like, what game did you play with them?
So that was Scythe, and to be fair, I've only done that once with them. I don't do it as much as I want to, and that was like 2 years ago. It's certainly not something I do frequently.
And Scythe now has its own digital implementation that's different.
It is different, and from the last time I saw it, not very good. Interestingly enough, but yeah, that's kind of beside the point.
Resistance is the quintessential social deduction game. We did not mention we've been playing that all together by forum or by Slack, for a couple of years. We haven't played a game in a year or two, but we were playing it super regularly for a very long time, and I think you still do that.
I still do with the same group, yeah.
With your real friends.
Right, exactly.
That's not even a joke. I don't know why you're laughing.
Because I'm his real friend.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so I previously mentioned one of the things that I am most afraid of with the technology, which is with the cyber. And that is this concept that we have talked about previously, which is I called the Smash Brothers of the Guitar Hero effect, which is one player getting too good. Get good, as it were. If you play, I know Splendor has a digital implementation. Race for the Galaxy has a digital implementation. Innovation is another one where when you can knock out a game in 12 minutes by yourself, and it's not a super complicated game, after you've done that 10 or 15 times, you're on a different playing field than all the people that you play with. And that, to me, it makes me a little afraid of diving into a game that I really like or have on my shelf, because if I get 20 plays into that, I'm either going to decide, well, I don't like this game as much, or I'm just way better than everybody else, and it's no longer going to be fun for them.
That is a great point. I totally agree with you there. That's one of the things that sort of kept me from playing digital games, because I assume going into these sites that offer digital games that every single person playing is better than me at it because they've played it a number of times digitally, and I'm playing it for the first time, and they've got a number of reps under their belt. I'm also cognizant of that issue. I feel like, and I don't think I would ever play a game, or I'd be less likely to play a game digitally that I knew that my friends wanted to play in person, and especially if we wanted to play them often. The games I've been playing digitally have been mainly really light games, again, like Can't Stop, Ink and Gold. Targi is probably the longest, aside from this Concordia game. But, we've talked about playing Great Western Trail, and hopefully we're going to do that soon. But that's a game that I would not play digitally, because I would be worried that it would be less fun for you or less fun for me. Just it would worsen our shared experience. It definitely makes me steer clear of playing certain games. But a game like Concordia, I know you guys have expressed interest on one level or not, but I feel like that's a game that we're not all clamoring for. So I feel like if I don't play it that way, I may not be able to play it at all. So yeah, it depends on the game and my friends' expectations and my expectations of future plays.
I suspect that this would be the same for both of you as well, but I can't imagine ever playing a game digitally for the first time, having not played the physical board game at all. Is that something you've done?
I don't think it's anything I've done, but it's something I could do.
I feel like,
especially for a game that I don't think I would buy,
that you would necessarily.
Or I would run
into.
Okay,
that's fair. I think for me, it just sort of always seems like I always want my first impression of a thing to be as intended,
sure,
as it were. And if you have a board game that starts as a board game and was later adapted to a digital version, then to me, it seems like the board game was the intended version.
Sure,
of it,
that's
right?
fair. Yeah.
But yeah, that's not something that's ever been tempted, because a lot of times people have approached me to be like, "Hey, do you want to? I'll teach you this game online, and we can play." That doesn't sound that appealing to me, especially when it involves an instruction. Having to teach me the game and having to do that purely digitally just sounds miserable.
Yeah,
without having to be able to see the board and the components in front of you.
I guess when I say that I might consider doing that for a game I haven't played, it would certainly be for a lighter game. Yeah, I can't see myself being taught or learning a heavy game with the intention to play it digitally. That does sound unappealing to me.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess we want to close this episode out by just sort of talking about our closing statements. I kind of always run this like it's a debate. So This is the closing remarks on board games and the cyber.
Right.
And the digital frontier. So, Mark.
My closing sort of thought in terms of digital board games and the digital implementation of board games is that I am sort of new to it, and I'm excited to
never leave your house again.
That's right, my gym again.
That's true.
That's right.
Oh, well, that was a slip of the tongue.
Again, I've just been pleasantly surprised in checking out these sites that offer digital implementations of board games, and I like having a couple games of lighter games like Dixit going at the same time and getting a little notification saying, hey, play the next round. They pop up infrequently, but it's a nice little surprise during the day. So, and the Concordia game has been really fun to play with the listeners on Discord. So,
are you logging those plays?
You know what? I am on the fence because I have never logged digital plays. I felt like they were a whole separate thing. But this is making me this game of Concordia feels like it's log worthy. And so where is the line now? Because these games of Can't Stop and these games of Targi are legit games. So I'm feeling like I might log them in. But then I'm torn because the Onirim plays. I got to go back to those.
Yeah, you got to go retroactively.
I feel like it's funny because I'm glad you brought this up because I'm torn. I feel like these are loggable games.
I don't know. I think you lost all credibility when you revealed that you're playing Dixit with a bunch of random people on the internet.
Wait, how did I lose credibility?
Because it's here's a party game, but you're playing...
We're having a party. We're having a long-term digital party.
But
we're a cybering, right? That's what cybering means,
That's
right?
what that means.
Yeah.
That's exactly what that means. Neelan?
I think for me, the only one I sort of come back to frequently, like I said, is Through the Ages. I'm looking for more long form, especially 2-player games that are sort of in that realm, just to vary it up, basically. I used to play this with my brother quite heavily, and if there was another game I could sort of pass the time with occasionally whenever he's awake and whenever I'm awake, I would love to find it.
Sounds like you need a new brother.
You're applying?
My name does end in N, so
Oh, yeah.
I am.
That's true.
I am eligible.
That's fair. But yeah, other than that, like you sort of also said earlier in the episode, new ones come out all the time. I try them for a couple of games and then sort of bounce off them. I'm looking for another one to stick. There are a couple of games I really wish had digital implementations. I would kill for a really good, I know there is an unofficial, somewhat digital implementation of Netrunner, but I would love Magic the Gathering level digital implementation of that. That would be fantastic.
Do you log plays?
Digitally, no.
No. Why? I mean, I want to be convinced. I'm not sure where I fall on this.
I don't know why. Just because honestly, it never occurred to me to do it, and even now thinking about it, it would seem excessive. I don't know.
You know,
But like a game of Through the Ages digitally feels like a
big deal.
Like,
yeah, no, you're right. I mean,
and it feels like
if that's the only way I'm going to play Through the Ages, then that should be in my record, certainly.
right,
to some
and
extent.
it feels like you are actually playing Through the Ages. It
Oh,
doesn't feel
yeah.
like you're like not really.
No,
playing it.
totally. Because I mean, even when you're playing that at a table, like you're just staring down at your board,
Right.
so it's basically the same
I
game.
think I'm gonna have to update the logs, boys.
I actually, honestly, I could see myself doing it for Through the Ages.
Yeah.
So I've cut about 2 hours out of this discussion that they just had to save you all the trouble about logging plays. My thoughts on board games as apps is kind of conflicted. I mostly don't get it, to be honest. I understand why if you don't have a game group to play with, but you lose so much of the experience. You lose the social interaction. You lose the fun of running those components through your hands, as Neelan loves to do.
That is true.
And I just feel like a lot of the charm is sucked out of it. That isn't to say that I haven't done it or won't continue to do it in certain contexts, but the mechanisms of the game are not actually what I'm interested in diving into for the most part. It's mostly the people that I'm playing with. I don't really have a closing there. It just doesn't make sense to my brain, and I am afraid of the cyber. I'm great with computers. I'm a computer genius, but beware of the cyber.
Right.
Cool. Well, we did want to end this episode. It sounds like we are ignorant. Mark is making eyes at me. But if you have a board game app implementation that you think is amazing, that we must check out, that is going to change our minds, we welcome you to the debating ring. Please let us know. And if you want to play a game digitally, Neelan is always looking for Through the Ages friends.
Yep.
And Mark is always
I'm just looking for friends.
to play Dixit with him while he's in the gym.
Yeah.
Man, what a loser.
You don't think that's cool? Like walking around, you get a notification that it's your turn to play Dixit. Play one round Dixit, boom, real quick, come up with a funny line, pick a card. Just like right now, I could play just one quick round of Dixit. There's not a real big commitment. What's wrong with that? That's fine.
All right, I'll do it.
Okay.
Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Discord at boardgamebarrage.com/Discord. Our website is boardgamebarrage.com. You can email us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. We appreciate the community that is building. We're so grateful for all of your notes and emails and comments, and especially your reviews, which help sustain the podcast, sustain our souls. As always, thank you to Heart Society for their fantastic intro and outro music, What's on Your Mind, Kid, from their album Wake the Queens. You can find them at heartsocietymusic.com.
Yes.
I've said it so many times. Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
It's like I oscillate between knowing whether I hate everyone or whether I love everyone.
Really? Okay.
And I just can never quite figure it out.
When do you... I feel like I have seen the former, but I don't know when the latter has made itself public.
Or private to you in the many years that you have known me. Well, that's sad. Oh, wait,
Every number is a consequential number. Every number is a consequential number, Mark.
61? That seems like among the most boring numbers.
That's true, actually.
61. That's like...
I can't think of a single...
Because like
a single good property.
64 is they're sort of like close to each other, so they feel like there's like you're rising to something. 61, it's like 6 is over here, 1's over here, 1's round, 1's skinny. It's like weird. I don't like that number. 61. I'm glad I'm a 60 boy.
It's like, you know, you'd think he'd be pumping me up to host the show. But
he may as well give up now because 61.
Yeah. Well, this is how we pump each other up. Just straight shit talking.
That's right.
All right. We doing this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh, so bad.
Gotta
You're not
cover 61.
You're not gonna. Oh, I gotta include. I keep forgetting
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
because it's a forgettable number.
Yeah,
no one
exactly.
cares about 61.
No one cares about
They're just
61.
gonna skip it.
Even more now.
Hello and welcome to episode 61 of the Board Game Barrage podcast. Today's featured topic is board game apps. Specifically, board games in app form. So, board games as video games. What even is a board game? Is a video game
What are we doing here?
a board game?
And when do we start our video game sister podcast?
That is true. We have hopes to take over both sides
Yeah.
of this. Just games.
Just tackle both industries now that we've mastered this one.
all games, all the time.
What would we call it? Video game.
Video game barrage, Mark.
Oh,
Video
I guess-
game garage.
No, video game
Yes.
V. It's like VGV. Video game.
Fine.
That's a tough one.
Yeah, there's
I
not
had-
much that rhymes with arage.
Video game Velociraptor.
Video game farage. That's one for our UK friends.
That's nice.
We
little,
hadn't
little Brexit drop there.
we hadn't planned for that.
I mean, you could. I mean,
No.
I'm all for
I
listening
don't.
to it.
I'm not going. We don't go back here.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
We only look to the future, Mark.
That's right. Well, no, we look to
We
the
never-
present. We never look to the future or the past.
Nostalgia is an
Is
enemy
a lie. Yeah.
of ourselves,
Nostalgia is an enemy to the self.
to the soul.
Right. That's our tagline.
We have always been at war with nostalgia.
I
Where's that from?
Ah,
That sounds familiar. Over
we have
here.
always been. It's from a movie or something.
Don't ever say that. You made it up, Neil.
it's from
a hell of a line
it's
to make
from a
up.
movie or something.
I wish I.
All right. Today's featured topic is going to be all about apps. Wait, no. Is this the wrong one?
Yeah, that's a wrong one.
Oh my God. Okay. Today's